If you told me 10 years ago that I'd end up a billionaire, I probably would have laughed in your face. Back then, I was broke, like couch surfing, working 2 jobs, eating instant noodles kind of broke. I didn't even own a bed, just a futon my buddy let me borrow. I also had a wife who, at that time, I thought was my biggest supporter. We'd met in college when I was still naive enough to believe love conquers all. She was beautiful, ambitious, and had this way of making me feel like the world was worth trying for. But if I'm being honest, the cracks were already there. She liked the idea of me chasing dreams, but she hated the part where dreams meant sacrifices. I'd come home from a 12-hour shift, sit at my laptop to work on a project idea, and she'd sigh loudly, scrolling through Instagram, pointing out all the vacations her friends were going on. It was subtle at first, comments about how I should settle down into something stable, how she deserved more, or how I was always tired. I brushed it off. I figured stress was temporary. I believed she was just frustrated that life wasn't glamorous yet. But here's the thing. Sometimes those subtle cracks are the warning signs you ignore because you're too busy hoping the foundation holds. And I ignored them. I thought love was enough glue. Spoiler, it wasn't. The first real sign that something was seriously wrong came one Friday night. I'd just finished a brutal week, 2 double shifts, plus late nights working on a pitch deck for a startup idea I was obsessed with. I was exhausted, running on caffeine and stubbornness. I came home with cheap takeout because that's all I could afford, expecting maybe she'd appreciate the effort. Instead, I walked in and saw her all dressed up, heels on, makeup perfect. She barely glanced at me before saying, "Oh, I already ate. I'm meeting some friends." I didn't think much of it. At least, I told myself not to. But my gut twisted when she left without even asking how I was. I sat there with cold noodles, staring at the wall, wondering when I became background noise in my own marriage. That night, I barely slept. I told myself it was stress, paranoia. But deep down, I felt it. That sharp ache in your chest when you know the person beside you is already slipping away. Funny thing, that same weekend, while she was out, I got the email that changed everything. A small investor agreed to hear me out. That was the seed. I didn't know it then, but my life was about to flip upside down in ways I couldn't imagine, both the good and the devastating. So Monday rolls around, and I go into this meeting nervous as hell. My pitch deck wasn't some slick presentation. It was me, a secondhand laptop, and a dream. I sat across from this investor in a cheap suit that didn't quite fit, hands sweating, heart pounding. I thought he'd laugh me out of the room. Instead, he leaned back, listened, and said something I'll never forget. "You've got nothing, and that's exactly why I trust you. You've got nothing to lose, so you'll fight for this harder than anyone." That line lit a fire in me. He gave me just enough money to get started, nothing glamorous, but enough to build a prototype and keep the lights on. I came home buzzing, wanting to share the news with my wife. I thought she'd be proud, maybe even excited that all the late nights were paying off. Instead, she rolled her eyes and said, "Great. Another hobby. When are you going to think about our future instead of chasing pipe dreams?" That crushed me. I felt this mix of anger and heartbreak. Here I was, on the brink of something real, and the person I loved most couldn't even fake a smile. That was the night I realized. Sometimes the people closest to you can't see your vision, not because it's impossible, but because they don't believe you're capable of it. And that realization, it cut deeper than I wanted to admit. After that investor meeting, I threw myself into the work. I mean full throttle. Coding till sunrise, cold coffee as my bloodstream, sleeping 2 or 3 hours a night. Every ounce of me was poured into making the idea real. Meanwhile, my wife, she drifted further. Nights, she didn't come home until after midnight. Excuses that didn't add up, girls' night, work thing, just needed space. I tried not to think about it. I told myself, focus on the company, prove her wrong, prove them all wrong. But the doubts were always there, whispering in the back of my mind. I'd look up from my laptop at 3 a.m., see the empty side of the bed, and wonder who she was with. One night, around 2 a.m., she came in smelling like perfume that wasn't hers, with a smile that didn't look like it came from me. She climbed into bed, turned her back to me, and fell asleep instantly. I stared at the ceiling for hours, my chest tight. I wanted to ask. I wanted to scream. But instead, I buried it. I buried it under lines of code and business plans, pretending the only thing that mattered was the company. And maybe in a twisted way, I should thank her for that. Because the more I suspected her betrayal, the harder I worked. And the harder I worked, the closer I got to something bigger than either of us. It happened on a Tuesday night. I was knee-deep in spreadsheets when her phone buzzed on the counter. Normally, I wouldn't touch it. I wasn't the snooping type. But something in me just snapped. I glanced at the screen and saw a name I didn't recognize, with a message that said, "Last night was worth every second. Can't stop thinking about you." My stomach dropped. My hands went ice cold. It's one thing to suspect. It's another to have it spelled out right in front of you in glowing letters. When she walked in an hour later, humming like she hadn't just detonated my heart, I couldn't even look at her. I wanted to yell, to confront her, but instead I shut down. I told her I was busy, kept my eyes glued to the laptop, and let the rage stew inside me. That night, I barely blinked. My brain replayed every sigh, every late night, every dismissive comment, and suddenly the whole puzzle snapped into place. She wasn't just losing patience. She was gone. She'd been gone. But here's the thing. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror and thought, you've got two options. Let this destroy you, or let this fuel you. I chose fuel. The morning after finding that text, I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I went to the mirror, stared at the tired, hollow-eyed guy looking back at me, and said out loud, "This ends one way, better or bitter." I made a decision. Every ounce of pain she caused me, I'd recycle into progress. Every tear, every sleepless night, every time she laughed at me, I'd turn it into momentum. I started working even harder, but this time it felt different. I wasn't just building a company. I was building an escape route. A future where I wasn't begging anyone to believe in me. The startup began to get traction. Our prototype worked. We landed a small partnership with a local business. Then another. Then another. It wasn't glamorous yet, but it was real. Meanwhile, she grew colder. Fewer texts. Less interest. More nights, out with friends. I didn't stop her anymore. In fact, a strange calm washed over me. I knew where I stood. She had chosen her path, and I was choosing mine. For the first time in years, I felt clarity. And clarity is dangerous, because once you taste it, you can't go back to living in fog. It was a Saturday afternoon when it finally boiled over. She came home tipsy, laughing into her phone. Didn't even notice I was sitting in the living room waiting. I just said, "Who is he?" Her face froze. For the first time in months, she actually looked scared. She stammered, denied, tried to play it off, but I had the text saved. I showed her. Silence. And then she said the line that cut deeper than any knife. "Well, maybe if you actually made money instead of chasing dreams, I wouldn't need to look elsewhere." That one sentence burned itself into my brain. It wasn't just betrayal, it was contempt. Everything I was fighting for, everything I was sacrificing, she saw as worthless. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just stood up, grabbed my laptop, and told her, "One day, you're going to regret that." Then I walked out. That was the last night I ever slept under the same roof as her. I crashed on a buddy's couch for a while after that. Just me, my laptop, and this gnawing ache in my chest. The silence at night was brutal. No footsteps, no arguments, no laughter, just me and the hum of my computer fan. But here's the wild part. I got more done in those weeks than I had in the last year. No distractions, no emotional drain, just pure focus. And then something crazy happened. Our startup went viral. A blog wrote an article about what we were building, and suddenly emails poured in. Investors, customers, opportunities one never thought would even glance at us. I remember sitting there on that ugly couch, staring at my inbox, thinking, is this real? I didn't have time to process heartbreak anymore because the business was demanding every second of me. Meanwhile, she sent me a few texts, half apologies, half accusations. Stuff like, "We can fix this," or "You'll never make it without me." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I had finally realized she was an anchor, not a partner. Walking away from her hurt like hell. But walking toward my vision felt like oxygen after drowning. A month after that blog post, I was sitting in a dingy coffee shop when I got the email. One of the biggest venture capital firms in the city wanted a meeting. I thought it was spam at first. I reread it 10 times, heart hammering. That meeting changed everything. They didn't just invest, they believed. For the first time, someone with serious weight saw me as more than the broke dreamer. They gave us the capital to scale, and suddenly the company wasn't just surviving, it was exploding. I hired a team, got an actual office, still tiny, but it wasn't my buddy's couch. We were working around the clock, chasing deals I used to think were impossible. And the best part? Every contract we landed, every headline we got, I thought about her words, "You'll never make it." Those words became jet fuel. Then, out of nowhere, I saw her again. At the grocery store of all places. She looked shocked, like she didn't expect to see me standing tall, clean-shaven, smiling for the first time in months. She asked, almost casually, "How's work?" I just smiled and said, "Better than ever." And I meant it. That was the day I realized success wasn't just about money. It was about proving to yourself that you can rebuild when the world, and the person you trusted most, bets against you. As the company grew, something strange happened. I started becoming a version of myself I barely recognized. The broke, desperate kid who used to beg for validation was gone. In his place was a man who had investors calling me, who had employees relying on my vision, who could walk into a room and command respect. The first time I signed a deal worth more than my entire lifetime earnings up to that point, I sat in my car afterward and just cried. Not because of the money, but because I realized I wasn't defined by her betrayal anymore. I wasn't the guy she mocked or the man she walked out on. I was someone stronger. But here's the thing nobody tells you about success. It doesn't erase the pain. It just changes its shape. I'd go home to a nice apartment now, one I actually owned, and still feel that hollow quiet. No one waiting. No one to share the victories with. And yet, there was freedom in that emptiness. For the first time, the silence wasn't suffocating, it was space. Space I could fill with whatever future I wanted. One night, while looking out over the city lights from my balcony, I realized she thought I needed her to build a future. But the truth? Losing her gave me the future I was meant to build all along. About a year after walking away, she reached out. Out of the blue. No preamble, just a text. "Can we talk?" I was wrong. My first instinct. Laugh. My second. Rage. My third. Sadness. Not because I still cared, God knows I didn't, but because I realized how much I had healed. I'd gone from the guy she left behind to someone she couldn't ignore. She asked to meet. I agreed, partly out of curiosity, partly out of closure. We met at a quiet cafe. She looked different, not just older, but humbled. She tried to explain her mistakes, her selfishness, how she'd grown. I listened, nodded, sipped my coffee, and then I said something that shocked even me. "You're too late. I didn't need you to succeed. I needed me." Her jaw dropped. She'd expected me to beg, to fall back into the past. But I didn't. I walked away feeling lighter than I had in years. That conversation didn't burn, it liberated me. Sometimes the people who hurt you most aren't villains. They're just signposts pointing you toward your own strength. After that cafe meeting, I threw myself fully into the company. Not out of revenge, not out of proving her wrong, but because I finally understood what I was capable of when no one else was in the way. We launched products that disrupted the market. Investors fought to get a piece of us. Employees who once doubted my vision now treated me like a leader worth following. The company wasn't just making money, it was making an impact. I even hired a team of people who reminded me of the me I used to be: hungry, scrappy, relentless. Together, we built something bigger than myself, bigger than any one person. And through it all, I realized something important. Success isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming your life. It's about waking up every day and choosing yourself, even when others have chosen against you. I wasn't just a billionaire now. I was a man who had endured betrayal, heartbreak, and doubt, and came out stronger. Looking back, the betrayal felt like a burning brand on my chest, but it taught me more than comfort ever could. I learned that people will leave, fail you, or underestimate you. And that's not always a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their limitations. I also learned that pain can be a tool. Every sleepless night, every pang of heartbreak, every insult, those became fuel. Not for revenge, but for transformation. And perhaps the hardest lesson, sitting in my office, overlooking the skyline, I often catch myself thinking about that old apartment, the cold noodles, the texts I wish I hadn't seen. And for a moment, I feel the weight of it all, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the loneliness. But it's different now. Those memories don't sting. They remind me how far I've come. They remind me that I'm not defined by someone else's choices or by the nights I cried on a futon. I'm defined by the choices I made after the pain. I also realized something profound. Closure isn't about fixing the past. It's about accepting it and using it as a springboard. I don't resent her anymore. She played her part in my story, and now I get to play mine. The one where I thrive, where I build, where I choose myself every single day. And the most surprising part? The freedom, the confidence, the relentless energy to keep building. It all started when I hit rock bottom. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this. Your life isn't defined by the people who leave you or the hardships that break you. It's defined by how you respond. I started with nothing, no money, no connections, not even a stable place to sleep. I had only an idea, determination, and a willingness to turn heartbreak into fuel. That's how I built my empire. That's how I became a billionaire. And the surprising part? The people who doubted me, the betrayals, the nights of despair, they were all part of the blueprint. Without them, I wouldn't have pushed hard enough, fought long enough, or believed fiercely enough in myself. So here's my advice. When someone leaves, when the world says no, when life throws betrayal or failure at you, don't crumble. Use it. Let it fuel you. Focus on your vision, your growth, your future. Build, persist, and never let anyone else's limitations define your potential. I didn't just survive heartbreak. I turned it into $1 billion lesson. And you can do the same. Start with nothing and build everything.